I'm 32 years old, single, and child-free by choice. I work remotely from a cozy one-bedroom apartment that I absolutely love. It's small, sure, but it's peaceful and mine. I've created a quiet routine that fits me perfectly: early mornings with coffee and books, focused workdays in my home office, evenings with yoga, streaming series, or crafting, and weekends spent exactly how I like: slow, quiet, and calm. I've never had the urge to become a parent. I respect the hell out of good parents, but it's not something I ever saw for myself. My sister Rachel, who is 6 years older than me at 38, has 3 children, twin boys who are 8 and a 4-year-old daughter. Her life is loud, chaotic, and full of the things I've consciously opted out of. And that's okay. At least, I thought it was okay. Rachel has always had this smug, slightly patronizing attitude toward me. She acts like motherhood is the ultimate graduation from being a regular human. Like the rest of us are just playing around until we earn the right to speak with real authority by raising children. She constantly makes snide little comments at family gatherings like, "You wouldn't understand, you don't have kids," or, "Oh, just wait until you have to worry about someone else for a change." I usually let it slide. It's annoying, but whatever, not worth starting a fight. But a couple of months ago, things crossed a line. It started on a Thursday afternoon. I was deep in work mode, in a Zoom meeting with my team, when I heard a knock at the door. Not the usual buzzing or ringing, just one sharp knock. I figured it might be a package, so I got up, thinking I could quickly grab it and return to my call. Instead, I opened the door and found Rachel standing there with her 3 kids and their backpacks. She looked rushed, didn't say hello, didn't ask if I was free. She just handed me their stuff and said, "You don't deserve privacy if you don't have kids, you should be grateful for the experience." Then she turned around, got into her car, and drove off. I stood there dumbfounded, 3 kids now in my living room asking for snacks while my laptop pinged repeatedly from my desk. I didn't even have time to process it. I canceled the rest of my meetings, dug out some leftovers from my fridge, and spent the next several hours trying to keep 3 kids entertained in a space that was never meant to host more than one adult. Later that evening, when Rachel returned, she acted like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. I tried to tell her this couldn't become a habit, but she just smiled, kissed her kids, and said something like, "It'll be good for you. This will teach you what real responsibility feels like." Then she left. I didn't know what to do. I assumed maybe she was having a hard time and needed support. Maybe she had an emergency. Maybe this was a one-time thing. I let it go. Except it wasn't a one-time thing. A few days later, it happened again. No warning. Just a knock at the door, some vague comment about how I have so much free time anyway, and then boom, 3 kids, a mess of toys, crumbs all over my carpet, crayon drawings on my dining table, and the constant chorus of, "I'm bored, I'm hungry, and where's the bathroom?" It became a pattern. Sometimes it was once a week. Sometimes more. She'd show up in the mornings, sometimes even on weekends, drop them off like I was a paid nanny she had already scheduled, and vanish. Once, I was in the shower when she came by. I didn't hear her knock. I only realized she had been there when I stepped out to find her children sitting on my living room floor, watching cartoons and eating dry cereal from one of my bowls. She had used her spare key. That was the day I changed the locks. When I told her I did that, she looked absolutely scandalized. She acted as if I had betrayed some sacred family code. She lectured me about how people without kids are so selfish, and said I was lucky to even have time to myself. She repeated her little mantra, "You don't deserve privacy if you don't have kids," as if that somehow made any of this okay. She claimed I was being dramatic, and said that I should be honored to get a glimpse into what real life looks like. I reminded her I never asked for that glimpse. I chose a different life. She didn't listen. The worst part wasn't even the inconvenience. It was the entitlement. The way she spoke to me, like I was less of a person, like my time and my space didn't matter simply because I wasn't a parent. Like her role in life gave her full permission to override my autonomy. And the fact that she never once said thank you or offered to help clean up after, not once. The kids were sweet, sure, but they were kids. They were loud, they spilled juice on my carpet, they broke a lamp, they left crayon on my walls. Rachel never cared. It got to the point where I couldn't relax on my weekends. I'd flinch every time I heard a knock, wondering if it was her again. I started keeping my phone on silent and leaving my lights off just to avoid the stress. I even had to tell a few close friends not to tag me in posts or stories, because I didn't want her to know I was home. I was being held hostage in my own life by someone who thought she was teaching me a lesson. Then came the final straw. Last week, I had a huge presentation for work. It was a team-wide pitch with a major client and I was the lead. I prepped for days. I rehearsed, I built the deck, I even ironed a blouse and put on actual pants just to feel like I was in professional mode. 10 minutes into the video call, as I was presenting, there was a knock at the door. I ignored it, another knock, louder this time. I muted my mic for a second, whispered an apology, and tried to continue. Then came the pounding. I excused myself and opened the door just a crack, praying it wasn't her. But of course, it was. She shoved the kids' backpacks into my hands and said, "They're your responsibility today," before turning around and walking away like she had every right in the world to do so. I looked at her kids. I looked back at my laptop. And I realized I was done. I closed the door behind them, gently this time. I helped the kids get settled with a movie and some snacks. I walked into my bedroom, shut the door, and made a call to Child Protective Services. When I made the call to Child Protective Services, I didn't do it in a fit of rage. I wasn't screaming, or crying, or slamming doors. I was calm. Too calm, probably, considering how deeply this whole situation had unsettled me. I had spent weeks being gaslit, disrespected, and used. I had tried setting boundaries. I had changed my locks. I had begged for communication. And still, my sister decided that her right to convenience outweighed my right to peace. That her version of teaching me responsibility gave her license to violate my home and my life over and over again. So I called. I told the truth. And then I waited. 3 days later, CPS showed up at her house. I only found out because Rachel sent me a flurry of frantic texts that morning. The first one just said, "What did you do?" The next few were more aggressive, accusing me of trying to destroy her family and get her kids taken away. I ignored them. I figured if she had time to type all that, she was still in her house and still with her kids, so clearly no one had been taken anywhere. But I knew better than to respond emotionally. What I heard later from a mutual friend, and confirmed through Rachel herself, in a phone call that started with screaming and ended with her crying, was that she thought the CPS visit was some kind of elaborate joke. A prank. She laughed when the caseworker introduced herself and said she'd received a report about the children being left in someone else's care without notice or legal consent. Rachel assumed I was bluffing, or trying to scare her into backing off. She tried to wave it away, told the caseworker that I was just her sister, and that I loved spending time with the kids. That we had some sort of mutual arrangement, a family tradition of helping each other out. That's when it started to fall apart. The CPS worker began asking basic questions. Where were the written agreements? Why had the children been left without any kind of supervision agreement or legal documentation? Why was there no emergency contact information left with me? Why did she not ask for consent, or even inform me before leaving them? Did she regularly leave them with non-guardians without discussion? Rachel tried to shift gears. She told them I had offered to babysit. That I was exaggerating. That I was emotionally unstable and had a history of making things bigger than they were. Then I sent them the screenshots. Texts where she said things like, "You don't get to say no, you're not even a real adult until you raise someone else's kids." Voicemails where she told me that my time wasn't valuable because I didn't have children. One particularly damning message where she said, "Just suck it up, this is what family is for. You don't get to opt out." I sent them all with timestamps. Each one painted a clearer and clearer picture. It wasn't about shared family support. It wasn't about love. It was about control. It was about Rachel dumping her responsibilities onto someone else and justifying it by devaluing my life. CPS did not take it lightly. They explained to her that parenting is not optional. That handing off your kids without communication, consent, or legal arrangements is not just irresponsible, it's a breach of basic child welfare expectations. They told her she couldn't treat her relatives like unpaid, untrained childcare providers, especially not during work hours or without any backup plans. They explained that the world doesn't operate on family guilt. They informed her that she would be placed on a parenting support plan. This was not removal. This was not a punitive action. This was a corrective measure. But to Rachel, it was humiliation. She was required to attend a series of household management workshops. She was assigned a parenting counselor. And, the part she found most unbearable, she was told she could not leave her children with anyone going forward without a signed agreement, with dates, times, contact information, and full consent. She could not simply say, "I'll be back at 6" and disappear. Everything had to be documented. Formalized. Tracked. She called me that night. Her voice was shaking. At first, I thought she was going to apologize. But instead, she sobbed into the phone and accused me of ruining her life. She said I had embarrassed her, made her look like a neglectful mother, shattered the trust of the people around her. She cried that now she looked like she couldn't handle her own kids and that everyone, the school, the neighbors, even her husband's parents, were looking at her differently. She asked how I could do that to her. She told me she would never forgive me. She hung up. I didn't reply. The next day, our mother called. She didn't even ask for my side. She went straight into a lecture, scolding me for being vindictive and cold. She said family should stick together. She said Rachel had just been overwhelmed and I should have had the compassion to see that. She accused me of airing dirty laundry to strangers and making things harder for everyone. She said I had weaponized my independence instead of using it to support the people who needed me. But I had warned them. Over and over. Quietly. Respectfully. Repeatedly. I told Rachel she couldn't do this. I told her to stop. I changed the locks. I told her not to use her spare key. I told her I was not a babysitter. I told her I had work. That I had boundaries. That I had a life too. She chose not to listen. And when I stopped letting her walk all over me, she acted like I had flipped the world upside down. Like I had committed a crime by reclaiming my own time and space. But the truth is, I didn't ruin her life. I just stopped being her free labor. I stopped being the silent witness to my own exploitation. I took the step she never thought I would take, I reported her. And now, for the first time, someone other than me is holding her accountable. They didn't listen. I thought that would be the end of it. After the CPS visit, the parenting support plan, the signed agreements requirement, I really believed that Rachel had finally been forced to look in the mirror. That, stripped of the ability to manipulate through guilt and entitlement, she'd have no choice but to reassess how she treated people. But instead of reflecting, she deflected. Instead of owning it, she weaponized it. And she did it in the most performative, attention-seeking way possible. She took it to Facebook. It started with a dramatic black and white photo of her kids eating sandwiches at the kitchen table, complete with a caption about single mothers fighting battles no one sees. She went on to write a painfully long rant, dripping with self-pity, where she called out certain family members for turning their backs on her in her moment of need. She said she had been betrayed by blood and that she had used every ounce of strength to survive. She accused me of being child-hating, selfish, and ungrateful, said I had weaponized the system to punish a hard-working mother and had no concept of what real life looks like. According to her, I reported her not because of what she did, but because I was jealous. Jealous of her beautiful chaos, jealous of her motherhood, jealous that she had something I'd never understand. The post got dozens of reactions. Heart emojis. Comments full of sympathy and outrage from people who had only heard her side. People calling me heartless, even though they never mentioned me by name. But it was obvious. She didn't need to tag me. She knew what she was doing. She was crafting a narrative, trying to flip the script. She wanted to be the victim. The brave, exhausted mother. The martyr who was punished for loving her children and asking her sister for help. And for a second, it worked. Until it didn't. One of her own friends, a woman I barely knew except through the occasional family barbecue, sent me a message. It started with an apology. Then came the screenshots. Turns out, in a private group chat, Rachel had been far less poetic about her intentions. She outright said she was sick of paying babysitters. That I worked from home and didn't have a real job, so I should just take the kids for free. She bragged about how she figured out a system that saved her hundreds of dollars a month. She even joked that she was going to start rotating through other relatives and neighborhood moms now that I was acting brand new. That was bad enough. But then I noticed another name in the screenshot. A mutual acquaintance from our old high school who had commented under Rachel's martyr post, asking the most obvious question no one else had thought to ask publicly: why didn't you just ask if your sister was okay with it? The post devolved into a comment war. Some people started pulling back. Others started asking their own questions. It got messier and messier, and then someone else, someone I don't even know, saw the thread and submitted an anonymous report to CPS. This time, I wasn't involved at all. The second visit happened 2 weeks later. Rachel didn't even have the dignity to call me. I found out when my mom, again, rang me up in a rage. But this time the tone was different. Less righteous indignation, more desperation. Because the follow-up wasn't soft. CPS returned not because I pushed them to, but because Rachel's own social media confession had laid out a plan to offload her kids on volunteers, none of whom were vetted, legal, or even willing. She had gone online and practically broadcast that she was looking to dump childcare onto anyone who would take it. Not just me anymore. Strangers. Casual acquaintances. A few of the women she mentioned had even received messages asking if they'd be willing to help out for a few hours here and there. That was the final nail in the coffin. The caseworker made it official. From that point forward, Rachel was no longer allowed to leave her kids with anyone unless it was legally documented and pre-approved. Every arrangement had to be logged. Each person had to sign an agreement. There had to be backup contacts. Emergency numbers. Full transparency. No last-minute drop-offs. No disappearing acts. No vagueness. She was done playing daycare roulette. Her parenting support plan was extended. She had to check in weekly. She was required to attend accountability meetings and show proof of every childcare arrangement. She wasn't allowed to let the kids stay even an hour with anyone who hadn't been vetted. Word got around. People stopped volunteering. She tried to complain to our extended family, but by now most of them had seen the Facebook meltdown and read between the lines. They realized what had really been going on. That she'd exploited family, manipulated people, and only cried victim when the consequences hit. She tried to delete the post, but it was too late. The screenshots were circulating. Even her ex, who had been mostly uninvolved until this point, stepped in to renegotiate custody after hearing from CPS. Because suddenly there were documents. Witnesses. Patterns. I didn't say a word. Not to her, not to anyone else. I stayed quiet while she unraveled in the exact way I warned her she would if she kept pushing people past their limits. All I ever asked for was respect. A boundary. A conversation. But she decided that her motherhood gave her a moral high ground to stomp over everyone else's lives. Now, she can't. No more sneak drops. No more guilt tripping. It's been a couple of weeks since everything finally came crashing down. Rachel hasn't spoken to me once in that time, not a call, not a text, not a drive-by guilt trip disguised as a visit. Her silence used to be the thing I feared. Now it feels like the greatest gift she's ever given me. Our mother has calmed down, at least publicly. The first few days after the second CPS visit, she was still tense, still clinging to this outdated fantasy that family means unconditional sacrifice, no matter the cost. But I think something shifted in her. Not because she agrees with what I did, but because the truth became impossible to ignore. The second report wasn't from me. It came from outside. Someone unrelated. Someone who didn't grow up with Rachel's dramatics. Someone who saw the same things I saw and decided enough was enough. That shook our mother more than anything I ever said could have. Because it proved I wasn't acting out of spite. I wasn't being cold. I wasn't trying to ruin my sister's life. I was just the first person who said no. Rachel, on the other hand, is living in the consequences she never thought would find her. She can no longer treat her kids like social currency, tokens she can deposit into other people's homes while she runs errands, attends brunches, or just takes a nap in peace. Every arrangement now has to go through the system. She has to notify, sign off, confirm, and verify. There's paperwork. Logs. Names. Contacts. Details. Her days of casually dumping her kids on whoever was too polite to say no are over. She's complained to mutual friends, at least the ones still willing to listen, that motherhood isn't supposed to be this complicated. That it used to be easier, more community-based, more flexible. But what she really means is, it used to be easier when she could manipulate people into saying yes. When she could wrap her demands in the warm language of family support and expect no one to push back. Now she's had to scramble. She's late to work more often. She's relying on paid sitters, and the cost is eating into her budget. One of the mutuals she used to brag to told me in passing that Rachel looked exhausted lately and not quite as confident as she used to be. I just nodded. I didn't offer an opinion. I didn't feel the need to gloat. Because honestly, I'm not angry anymore. I got my peace back. For the first time in months, my weekends belong to me again. My apartment is mine, not a drop zone for 3 children with nowhere to go. My mornings are quiet, my meetings uninterrupted. The door stays locked unless I choose to open it. The phone stays on silent when I need it to be. The air in my home doesn't carry that hum of anxiety that used to follow every knock, every car door slamming outside, every moment of doubt that today might be another day she decided my time belonged to her. I've gone back to spending Saturdays with a book in my lap, tea on the table, and zero obligations pulling me in 5 directions. I picked up new hobbies. Started journaling again. Signed up for an online course I'd been putting off because I didn't want to miss classes if I had to unexpectedly babysit. My life has found its rhythm again, unapologetically quiet and beautifully uninterrupted. And I don't feel guilty. For a while, I did. I second-guessed myself after the first CPS visit, even though I knew I'd done everything I could to avoid it. I worried I'd gone too far. That the backlash would stain our family dynamic forever. But now? That guilt is gone. Burned out. Replaced with relief. Rachel thought being a mom gave her a free pass to bulldoze my boundaries. She thought her chaos could be made my problem just because we share DNA. She believed her choices, her kids, her schedule, her fatigue, were more important than mine. That by not having children, I forfeited my right to peace and privacy. She learned, slowly and painfully, that it doesn't work like that. Being a parent doesn't give you immunity from accountability. It doesn't excuse manipulation. It doesn't mean the world, and certainly not your child-free sister, owes you an open schedule and a revolving front door. She expected submission. She got consequences. And now, for the first time in our entire relationship, my boundaries are standing. Not out of hope, not out of patience. But because she ran out of options to stomp through them. And I have no intention of lowering them again. She thought being a mom gave her a free pass to bulldoze my boundaries. She learned painfully that it doesn't.